Hi everyone, welcome. We're just going to give it about 1 more minute just to give some people time to log in, and then we'll get started. All right, hello everybody. We'll let some people trickle in, but I'm just going to go ahead and get us started. Make sure we are mindful of everyone's time. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Leaders of the Pack speaker series. My name is Anna Vlegia, and I am the Director of Career Services for the NC State Alumni Association. So we are excited to have an excellent lineup of speakers and are thankful that each of you have decided to join us and spend the next hour with us. I have just a few housekeeping items before we get started. So everyone is on mute and your video functionality has been turned off. This session is being recorded and will be made available by email to all registrants before the end of the day tomorrow. If you have any questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature. We also had several questions submitted through the registration form, so we're going to get to those and hopefully as many questions as possible. So just make sure you submit those through the Q&A feature. I want to quickly go over the layout of this event. So we have asked each distinguished alumni speaker to answer the following 3 questions. So question 1, how did you enter the workforce and migrate to where you are now? So for this question, each speaker will be answering the question individually on the computer. So we won't be doing a panel discussion for that one. But then question 2 and 3 will be done as a panel discussion. So question 2 is, what 3 factors have led to your success? Question 3, what advice would you give to your 20-something self? Or rephrased, what advice would you give yourself when you were first starting your career, knowing what you know now? So again, question 2 and 3 will be answered as a panel discussion, and then we will open it up to questions. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and welcome our distinguished alumni speakers. Unfortunately, Angela Rivers could not be with us today. She just recently had a death in the family, so we will miss her, and I know she really wanted to be here, but she will be in our thoughts and prayers. So we still have 3 wonderful speakers lined up, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves as they answer question number 1. So we are going to go ahead and get started with Benita Terry, and I'm going to kick it off to her.
Well, hello, good morning to everyone. My name is Benita. Chisholm is my maiden name, Terry. I'm the Senior Vice President for Metro Atlanta and Corporate Relations for Georgia Power Company, and I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia. So I thought I'd talk through, I do this presentation often. Normally the bubbles all come in and out, a little talking through about how I think of my career. And it kind of has a little bit of career advice in it too. I typically think of my career as a series of overlapping circles. And so with each job building on the previous job or previous jobs that I have. So what you'll see up there is, of course, I went to NC State. I have a degree in English from NC State. But then I went to the University of Michigan for law school. And because I decided I wanted to be a lawyer and wasn't really sure what else I could do with English degrees. I know there are a number of different things you can, but being a lawyer felt like the right thing. And I then went to be a law clerk, and then I started on my first job with Troutman Sanders, which is a law firm located in Atlanta, Georgia. And if you look at the pyramid to the right, what you'll see is each of those little areas represents each new job, and the colors actually correspond back with the jobs that I had. So for instance, on the bottom, I started out with Troutman Sanders. Legal was what I picked up long before, so it's white. It's what I came into it with, an employment lawyer. But then our major customer was a utility. So people often ask me, did I know I was going to work in the utility sector? No, I had no clue I was going to work in the utility sector. I just ended up working for a law firm, and their major customer was in the utility sector. And so I grew in that particular area. And then I left that and actually went in-house at a utility, and you'll see that. And I picked up some different areas of the law while I was in there, but I also got my first opportunity to be a supervisor. And so you'll see that show up in that second to the bottom line. And then I worked for a CEO for a while in a developmental role. That's a role where I got to kind of really follow the CEO around and kind of serve as his chief of staff. And it was really, really fun and a great opportunity. And I got some experience there. You'll see that's in that Georgia Power, big blue Georgia Power bubble. And you'll see for the next couple of jobs, almost everything I did was really new. I was learning something new. And that's where you should be in the beginning of your career. And I know sometimes it feels like you don't know what you don't know because you don't, but that's okay, right? So you're in the beginning of your career, you should be picking up skill sets and picking up areas that then will position you for other areas later. So those first three jobs, those Georgia Power jobs, workplace ethic manager, assistant to the CEO, distribution manager, and those three jobs, I just learned a lot and used every opportunity I had to grow my particular skill sets. I didn't say no to things that walked through the door. If they wanted me to work on a project or try something new, I said yes. If they wanted me to travel, I said yes. And I think early in your career, that saying yes is really very important. I left that role and went to my first executive role, and that was over at our nuclear company within Southern Company, which is the parent of Georgia Power. And I picked up some new skill sets. Those are in red. And I took some other skill sets with me, the legal. From White, I was their general counsel. I reported to a CEO. I've done that before at Georgia Power, and I've gotten experience in the external part of the business. And then in the next couple of roles, you'll see that I pick up some new skill sets. So at Gulf Power, you'll see some green pop in there. And then when I got to the role I have now at Georgia Power, which is the next to top, of course, the question mark's the top because I don't know where my career is quite going next. You'll see purple stuff. So in every role, I tried to build upon some skill sets that I had, and I tried to grow into some new skill sets. So that's kind of been my career trajectory. It's been a lot of fun. I've kind of moved from a legal role to an operations role. And that's, I think, in part because I took advantage of some opportunities earlier in my career to learn about operations. That's typically in a business like Georgia Power, the meat of the business. So your customer service, for us, it's the line workers and those type of folks. I learned about that part of the business really early on. And then it pops up again in the role I'm in now. So it made me better qualified for where I am now. And so it's been nice. People often ask me if I want to be a lawyer again. I think every lawyer longs to always be a lawyer. And even when you're not being a lawyer, you tend to act like a lawyer. I have to remind myself that I'm not practicing law. But I'm also very, very comfortable and used to non-legal roles. And so I consider myself someone who would be comfortable doing any of those things, legal roles and non-legal roles. So that's kind of been my career journey. You'll see I've moved around. I started off in North Carolina and I've lived in North Carolina for 3 times. I've lived in Georgia a couple of times. I did go to Alabama and I did go to Florida. I work for a company where moving, especially as an executive, is very important. That's one of the things you should determine for yourself in life if you want to be someone who is mobile and how important that is to you and your family or whoever helps you make those types of decisions. And for me and my family, which is my husband, who's also an NC State grad, moving was good. So that's just my career path, my career journey. I hope this all makes sense. It's just been really good for me to get some diverse experiences, and I've enjoyed what I've been doing along the way. So I think that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Benita. And I love the saying yes. I just feel like that is so important, especially early in your career. And then as you go, you just gain so much experience that you don't know that you will need in the future. So I think that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So now we are going to get Jason Simon up. Let's see, Jason. And let me get your PowerPoint pulled up real quick. Technology. Hold on one second.
All right. Awesome. Do I have control?
All right. Thank you, Jason. Take it away.
Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. I'm Jason Simon. I'm the CEO of Simpson Scarborough. I'll give you a little bit more information on what that means. I'm happy to be with you today. I'm coming from Oakland, California. So you're almost at lunchtime and I'm still sipping coffee, which I do throughout the day. I thought I would give a little bit of my background just kind of as a story. I've been surprised how interconnected things are in my life as I reflect back on it. This is my dad. That's me in the baby carriage. My dad was a college professor and super smart guy. Went to school at UC Berkeley for his undergrad, then went to Columbia, got his PhD at Stanford, and even spent a little bit of time at Harvard Law School. My grandmother always used to give him a hard time because he got a full ride to Harvard Law School and then quit after a semester and decided he didn't want to be a lawyer. So I grew up going to college, living on college campuses my entire life. You know, in the summers, my dad would teach at other schools. I was born in North Adams, Massachusetts, which is where Williams College was. This is a picture of Williams in the beautiful fall. Spent most of my life in North Carolina when my dad was a professor at UNCG, and then he went on and he was at ECU for a really long time. I went to high school in Greenville, North Carolina. All my friends went to Carolina from high school, so I decided I was going to go to NC State. So you can immediately see how emotional and rational my decision-making process was as a youngster. I think one of the things that is probably one of those seminal moments in my life, and certainly played a big part of my career. When I was a college freshman, I actually answered an ad in the Technician and was hired as a videographer for the NC State Athletics Department. And my job was to sit in the crow's nest at Reynolds Coliseum, and I taped basketball practice. I did that for a whole year. It was Jim Valvana's second to last year. And then I was a manager my sophomore year for the men's basketball team, and then was a manager under Les Robinson his first 2 years at NC State. So being a part of the men's basketball program, I mean, one, just kind of, I think, saved my college experience. I, went from doing really poorly in school. I was one of those students who, given too much time, didn't know what to do with it, and really turned around sort of my academic career and found a real purpose at NC State when I became involved with the athletics department and specifically with the men's basketball team. I graduated from NC State and began a career in sports writing and sports publishing. I was an associate editor for UMI Publications in Charlotte, North Carolina. They did, among other things at that time, the ACC basketball handbook. They also did basketball publications, sort of preseason publications for a bunch of big conferences across the country. Did some work on NASCAR and then took that, and I was a writer for the Wolfpacker for about 4 years or so. Worked on the Wolfpacker as well as some other college publications. Worked on a publication for the Braves and for the New York Mets. And that was also a really great time. And that actually led to, I began to build a professional network and became really close with some of the men's basketball coaches, and took over and was in charge of media relations for the NC State men's basketball team under Herb Sendek for 5 years or so, which is, I could probably answer a lot of questions just about that role. It's a job that a lot of people think is, one of those dream jobs, and was certainly a great experience. I left that and went to go work for this is my first move into marketing and branding. I worked for a marketing and branding firm in RTP, worked with Red Hat Software right when they were beginning to go public. We also worked with John Deere, IBM, Sony Ericsson, really made that first move into marketing. And then I came back to NC State and was the first university-wide director of marketing, and led a couple of really big campaigns and sort of the first kind of integrated marketing communications work at NC State. You can see a little bit of the work that I did there. I was one of the folks that led a campaign called Red Means Go. And you can see here, this is just a little bit when they rolled out 2 years ago. The Red Means Go commercials were posited as a noticeably different from the typical university genre. So I sort of began to move into having more of a voice and some leadership in terms of higher education marketing. But that doesn't come without its criticism. There was an ex-marketing leader who came after me that then said, I think Red Means Go was an attempt to show NC State was different. And personally, I think it may have gone a little too far. So that's a little bit about me. I always maybe go a little bit too far. I moved to Oakland, California, almost 13 years ago. As Bentina was saying earlier, such an important thing to be able to, or to be open to moving and change. I love being in Oakland. I led marketing communications efforts for the University of California system, so all 10 UC campuses, and was in charge of marketing for all of those institutions for about 5 years. I always like to tell people that I lived in the Bay Area for 13 years, and during that time, the Giants won 3 World Series and the Warriors won 3 NBA titles. So good things are happening. And now I'm the CEO of a marketing communications integrated marketing firm called Simpson Scarborough. The company has been in business for about 15 years. I met my business partner, Elizabeth, through some of my earlier work at NC State and also at UC. And we do all kinds of different work, brand work for just a ton of different schools across the country. You can see some of those schools there. So have done some work for NC State. We're really involved in the naming of the current capital campaign, or the one that is nearing a conclusion, but have also done a lot of work with some really great schools, some of the ones that you can see here. So excited to talk to you all today and share a little bit more.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jason. That was awesome. And I love being able to just see all these wonderful universities that you've been able to work with. It's really wonderful stuff. So thank you so much. Last, but certainly not least, we're going to hear from Mark Callaway. So I'm going to get Mark up and running here. All right, Mark, take it away.
All right, great. Good afternoon. I'm Mark Callaway. I'm a partner at the law firm of Alston & Bird, which I refer to as a small firm of about 850 lawyers. And we have offices around the country. So, how did I get started and how did I end up at Alston & Bird? Well, it all goes back to NC State. So let me tell you how I chose NC State. I got in Carolina in State. It's only 2 schools I applied to. I had a sister at State, but I wasn't wedded to State. I sat down one night and watched a Carolina basketball game, and I tried to cheer for Carolina, but I could not do it. And with that, I knew I was coming to NC State. Now, I knew I wanted to be a lawyer before I got to college, but I, quite frankly, really didn't have a plan on how I was going to get into law school. And in the first year or so, I was an average student, which means, B's and C's and occasional A, but mostly B's and C's. And I had a lot of time on my hands. And so the summer before my sophomore year, I spent working in a machine shop as the very junior employee. And so I'd get filthy every day and come home, but I saved my money and I bought a 1972 Chrysler New Yorker, my land yacht. And so I rolled in back to Raleigh for the start of my sophomore year, and I parked my car behind Beckton Dorm where I was living. And I came out a little bit later and found that my car wasn't there. It had gotten towed. And so I didn't have a sticker yet, but it wasn't in a tow zone. So I looked up the rules and thought I was right, that it shouldn't have been towed. So I decided to appeal that. And back then, the parking appeals process was run by the Student Attorney General's Office in Student Government. I understand nowadays they don't have a student AG. And so I promptly appealed, and I promptly got a letter back denying my appeal. Not satisfied with that, I went to see the Student Attorney General, who was a guy by the name of Jerry Kirk. We had a spirited discussion about the parking rules, and he wouldn't give, and I wouldn't give, and we kind of left it at that. A few months later, I saw an ad in the Technician for an assistant position with Jerry. And so I decided, well, maybe I better pay that ticket before I go see Jerry. And so I went by the office where you pay tickets, but there was no record of it. And so I went to see Jerry. and he hired me because I had a different view of things than he did. So the lesson there is surround yourself with people with different views. And so that was the start of my time in student government at State, the second semester of my sophomore year. And I loved it, and it gave me purpose. It also helped me manage my time, and I was surrounded by people who were really good students and who wanted to go to law school too. And I became a much better student, mostly A and occasional B instead of B's and C's. And so during that time in student government, where I ran the parking appeals process, which is kind of ironic if you think about it, I met a guy by the name of Tom Hendrickson, and Tom had become the student body president at NC State. And so I got to know Tom. My senior year, I was a student attorney general. We both went on to law school, but stayed in touch with each other. I then went to work for a federal judge. I did a clerkship and also clerked for Jack Cazorla on the Court of Appeals. I had worked for Jack once before through the North Carolina Fellows Program, where Jack is a graduate of NC State and North Carolina Fellow. So he was a great help to me during that time. Fast forward 10 years to the 1992 presidential election when Bill Clinton won the election. The next day, a friend of mine called me, John Airwood, and said that a number of people had told him that he, John, ought to make a run to become the United States Attorney. U.S. attorneys are appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate. So he said he didn't want that. And I said, well, John, if you're not interested in that, I am, because I've always wanted to be a federal prosecutor. And so we called Tom Hendrickson. Well, why call Tom? Well, Tom happened to be the chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party. And we had stayed friends over the years, watched each other's back. And Tom and John and the governor and others helped me become the United States Attorney for the Western District of North Carolina. So I got appointed by the president and I served for 7 years. To let you know how lucky I was to get that job, you have to understand that I'd only been practicing law 10 years. Most people don't get that job that early. I was 35. I was the fourth youngest United States attorney in the country. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded by really good lawyers in the U.S. Attorney's Office. And we worked hard and we ran that office in a non-political manner, meaning we set our politics outside the door and just did our job. And so my supervisors, the people that I had as first assistant, criminal chief, and that sort of thing, happened to be Republican, but I didn't care as long as we all set our politics outside the door and did our work. I spent a lot of time in Washington as U.S. attorney, volunteering for committees and things like that, trying to get my office noticed so we could get more resources. For some reason, Attorney General Janet Reno took a liking to me, and she put me on the Attorney General's Advisory Committee of U.S. Attorneys, which is a 15-member committee of U.S. attorneys that goes to Washington once a month, advises the other U.S. attorneys, advises Washington on policy and that sort of thing. She made me chair that. And then one day when I was in D.C., she called me to her office. I thought to ask my opinion on who should be the next director of the executive office of U.S. attorneys. The director of the executive office in EOUSA, as it's called, is the oversight and support arm for all 94 U.S. attorneys' offices across the country. And when I started to tell her who I thought ought to get that job, she stopped me and said, I really would like you to do it. And so that put me in Washington, D.C. Towards the end of the Clinton administration, the beginning of the Bush administration for about 7 months. So, you know, every Sunday night I'd fly to D.C., I'd fly home on Friday night, and I'd fly back and work 12-hour days serving at the department. And it was a great job. I got to know U.S. attorneys from all over the country. So I know at least one lawyer in every federal district in every state in the country, many times more. And that made my legal career. That opportunity to get to know people from across the country has allowed me to practice law across the country. I tried during my time with the department to be the voice of reason and common sense in meetings and tried and advocated doing what was best for the case as opposed to doing what might be best for me or best for my district. You have to view those kinds of things, and I would say every job, as a job of service. It might come with perks, but it's not a job of privilege. Just keep in mind that every job is a job of service. From there, I landed at Alston & Bird, where Alston & Bird was beginning to start its white collar program. And so I'm a white collar lawyer. And what that means is I defend companies and executives against criminal and civil investigations by the Department of Justice. So I'm oftentimes on the opposite side of the table from people I either used to work with or whom I've met over the years through the Department of Justice. And I love doing it. I love working with the younger lawyers who are far smarter than me. It's a great opportunity to mentor them because I've had a lot of help over the years from people like Jack Kazort and Tom Hendrickson, Judge Potter, my wife, of course, who supported me throughout the years, and others. And so that's how I got to Alston and Bird. And it's all started at NC State with a parking ticket.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I do thought it was fun. I did think it was funny when you ended up working for the office that you were kind of battling with at the beginning. So that was funny. All right. So now I'm going to ask the other speakers to join me, and then we will get going on question 2. So if anyone has questions, please submit those through the Q&A. Like I said, we have some, but I'd love to take some live if you have any burning questions as we get through these next 2. So, all right, we're going to go to question number 2, which is what 3 factors led to your success? And I feel like, Mark, you were on a roll, so you want to kick us off with this question?
Sure. I would say hard work. Hard work breeds luck. And so you've got to work hard. There's nothing like preparation. I'm a pretty good lawyer in court when I prepare. I'm not so good when I don't. And I've learned over the years as I've matured to prepare and to prepare early. The other thing I think is, we're all in the client service business. And so you have to put the needs of your client first and provide excellent client service, because if you don't, someone else will step in and take your client from you or take that business from you and provide them with excellent service. And so I really believe in that, and we focus on that in my office. And I think, too, keeping your word is incredibly important, as well as not speaking until you know the facts. And so if you develop a reputation for someone who is unreasonable, who keeps their word, you would be surprised at what you can get done with a handshake that other people have to, go through a lot of paperwork to get done too. So I think, and the one other thing I would add is mentors. I mean, many people have helped me over the years and are responsible for the success I've had, not just me alone. You can't do it alone. And so you need to give back. And when you get to a point in your career where you can mentor others, you should do it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to shoot over to Bentina. You have the lawyer mind as well. So anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I say that hard work is hands down something you have to have. I always tell people, stop worrying about where you're going if you're not taking care of where you are, right, in terms of your job and the position that you're in. And I think a number of us talked about, in particular, Mark did a really good job talking about the value of relationships. And you can never rebuild one after you tear it down. And you never really know when someone else is going to be a powerful influence in your life and in your career. And so you have to really value other people and relationships from a genuine place. And that grows into opportunities for you too. And then the last one is kind of, and I know that Jason will love this one, it's about your personal brand. And I find too often that people don't think about what they want their personal brand to be, and then how you act consistent in that brand. So I like to be known for someone who is flexible, who is fairly innovative, and who has a great disposition. And so the things that I try to do in my career, try to fit within that particular band. And I ask myself sometimes, how does this fit with your brand? This doesn't fit with your brand, or this could be something that can harm your brand, or how can you use that brand to your advantage in this particular situation? And so I'd say you tend to be later in your career when you think about that personal brand, but it's something you really should think about soon, because it helps you where you're going to go, helps dictate that, and helps set you up for better future. So.
Absolutely. Perfect segue to Jason.
Yeah, Mark and Bentina did such a good job. I mean, one thing just to reiterate an idea that they both shared is just that notion of working hard. I mean, I have loved every job that I've ever had. and have worked hard at every job that I've ever had and given a lot of time to each one of those. And I think that ultimately that's, one of the biggest things that's led to any other opportunity that has come my way. It's just been a willingness to roll up your sleeves and get the stuff done and not worry about how your job is defined versus something else, and just do the work. So I think that's really important. The three things that I noted, I mean, one of them is you have to be a good writer. And I think that two former lawyers will tell you that too, or two lawyers will tell you that too. Just being able to communicate your thoughts in writing, being able to be a strategic thinker and develop positions and, ideas and plans, that all comes from being a good writer. I'm, just amazed at times, at just a lack of really an ability for people to be able to articulate an idea. And so I think being a writer is just really critical and has been a big part of my success. I think knowing when it's time to leave a job is really important, and being willing to take those moments. I had a friend of mine tell me one time that, and I'd never observed this of myself, but he was like, you always have a plan for what you want to do next. And I didn't really know that to be true until he pointed it out, but I did always have a sense of when I was ready to leave somewhere and began to think about what I wanted to do next and started working on that before I left wherever I was currently. And so, just knowing there's a lot of jobs out there, and especially the further and further you move in your career, there's all kinds of opportunities that will come your way. And knowing when you've hit a roadblock and it's time to move on to something else, I think is a really important thing. And then just to reiterate something that Mark and Bentina both said too, is just building that professional network. I've been really fortunate to, work with and for a lot of really great people, and have interactions with other professionals in my career. And every move that I've made since I got my first job was because I knew somebody else, or because I got really great advice from somebody. Even when I took this chance and moved, cross country from North Carolina to California, it was really at the encouragement of another peer who sort of really pointed out to me that I'd have any opportunity that I wanted after I was at the University of California. So just being willing to move and being able to build that network is a really important thing too.
Yeah, it sounds like the network and the mentoring is definitely big pieces of what has led to success. So thank you so much for sharing that. So we move to question. So I phrased it two different ways. If one resonates a little bit more with you than the other, please feel free to answer the one that feels best for you. So what advice would you give your 20-something self, or what advice would you give yourself when you first started in your career, knowing what you know now? So Jason, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, so, well, one of them is, one thing is just to pick up exactly on what I was just talking about. I mean, take a chance, be willing to move, be willing to have another opportunity. I think one of my big regrets is I didn't take one of my dad's bits of advice. He was really encouraging me right after I graduated from NC State. My dad was a political scientist, and Eastern Europe was his area of specialty. He was, and that was right around the time of the fall of communism and in much of Eastern Europe. And he was encouraging me to move to Prague and open a Subway store in Prague. And if I would have done it then, I probably would be like lying on a beach in Greece right now. But it's a big world out there, and now we're even more interconnected than ever before, and the opportunities to be able to do stuff. I have a lot of friends that are expats that are living all over the world, and they have great lives, I feel like there's so much opportunity now. So, I definitely would say take a chance. And then, just what I said before, being open to things that are new, like, moving across country for me for California, I think was a really big thing.
You're a little bit of a risk taker, which has seemed to pay off. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. All right, Mark, what about you?
That was great advice, Jason. I agree with all that, and particularly the part about being a good writer. There's just no substitute for that. When Bentina says she had an English degree, the first advice I'd give myself would be, if I had to do over again, I would double major. I majored in political science, which I love. And State had a great political science department. I wrote a lot of papers, but I would also have gotten a degree in English. So I think I would, because of all the writing I do, I learned to write when I went to work for federal judge and then with Judge Kazor. That's where I really learned to write. But it's so important to be able to communicate your thoughts clearly. I think the other advice I would give, and I think I've done some of this and I would give it for the benefit of others, is, one of the best investments you can make is in yourself, and that is in your education, taking it seriously at the time. And it's hard to when you're early 20s to do that sometimes because there's so many other distractions, but invest in yourself and get the education you need. And look, if there are seminars you need to go to or things you need to buy to do your job, and you can't get them from work, just find a way to spend your own money and do it yourself. Because I think there's no greater investment than preparing yourself for the workforce and for the next job. So I'm really advocate of continuing to learn and investing in yourself. The other thing I would say, and I think this is real important too, is you need to treat the people that you work with very fairly, particularly the support staff. I watch young lawyers when they come in to see how they treat the staff. And if they act like a lawyer, their time is limited. Support staff can save you, or they can watch you twist in the wind if you make a mistake. So, you need to be kind to the people that you work with and be of service to them as well. Another thing I've said again is preparation, which I would say to myself. I haven't pulled an all-nighter in a long time, but I pulled a few at NC State. And so I would tell myself, you need to prepare early and often and be more disciplined. There's no, it's not bragging to say I stayed up all night, because you're not going to be at your best. And, get a good night's sleep is what you really need to be doing. But there are a lot more things I could say, but I think that's it in the core.
Yes, I value sleep more and more as I get older. So I definitely agree with those sentiments. So, all right, Bentina, what about you?
It's I'll go to something Mark was saying. So when I interview people for jobs, before we make the selection, typically there's an admin who would have greeted them when they came in. I actually asked the admin to come in and tell the interviewing committee or tell me if anybody was rude to them, because I think it really, really matters. And they don't have to have been exceptionally nice, right? It's an interview, you can be stressful, but I expect you to be personable to that person. And it tells me a lot about you if that person comes back and says, no, they were rude to me or something like that. So something to always think about, because it just shows you who you are, and goes back to me. I always think about that brand. And so is your brand someone who is rude to people? And I don't want that brand in my organization. One of the things this goes to what Jason said too, and I still try to ask myself this now, is the what would you do if you weren't afraid question. And I know that there were times, particularly when I was younger, where I didn't ask myself that question, and I let fear stop me from doing something. So that's probably, I think back now, I probably never studied abroad because I was always afraid. I didn't get into an airplane until I was out of law school. And so, and now as an adult, when I feel that weird feeling, I stop and say, okay, Bentina, is that fear? And then what would you really do if you weren't afraid? And then I try to do it, and jump and move forward. I know that's tough, especially when a fear is a natural thing to have, and it's a kind of can be a governor for your behavior, but you really have to ask yourself if that fear is holding you back, and what are you actually afraid of? Is a no really that bad? Stuff like that. And then the last thing is that you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to know the right questions. And I think earlier in my life, I felt like I had to have all the answers. And if I didn't know the answer, that was some type of deficiency that I had. And I've learned, I was talking to a coworker about this just the other day. We were talking about our CEO who, he's a CEO, right? So sometimes he can be intimidating. I don't find him intimidating, but I get that other people do. And she had gone to him and she didn't know all the answers and she was fretting about all that. And I said, I tell him all the time, I don't know. it's okay. He never kills me for it. He appreciates it. I always say, I'll get back to you with the answer. And then I diligently do that. And I figure out try to ask him the right questions to make sure I can get him the right answer. And so I think that, especially when you're early in your career, you believe that means something that you don't know. And it doesn't mean anything. You just don't know. And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually that kind of leads me into a question that came through on the registration form. And I think it kind of goes into what you just mentioned, Bentina, and then also with Mark, which is the continuous learning. So what do you do on a regular basis to learn more about your industry, and how do you adapt to those changes? So I don't know, whoever wants to kind of take that one, but I know that both of you kind of just briefly mentioned that.
Bentina, you want to go first?
Sure. So I like to say that I'm intellectually curious. Other people say that sometimes I'm a little nosy. So I ask, and my husband always says to me, you are not in lawyer mode, stop interrogating me. But I ask a lot of questions. And when I hear information, I try to dissect it and ask myself, what more is it that I need to know? And then I try to go find that. So from an industry perspective, pre-COVID, I tried to go to conferences that I needed to go to. I tried to have some level of professional development every year, both on the leadership side and then on the business side. And then the other thing is I really do try to be intellectually curious about our business. And sometimes for me, being a lawyer in a group of engineers, a company that is primarily engineers, sometimes that means I have to get a little more hands-on. So I go and ride with line crews, and I sat at a counter and took money with customer service reps, and I talk to customers, and I think all of that helps me better understand our business and the direction our business is going in, and gives me some context when I hear discussions that are a little more intellectual. So I just try to be genuinely curious about what my business does and how it fits into the grand scheme of the world.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I Google a lot. I look up. I read 10Ks. I ask my clients about their business when they're companies, and I try to stay up on that, what's happening in the white collar world and things like that. There's sort of no substitute for just sitting back and reading and finding out about your client's business. I tell young lawyers that the hard thing for me is I need to stay relevant and add value. And the older you get, the bigger the challenge is to stay relevant, or at least for people to view you as relevant. And occasionally I get lucky and I add value. And so that's what I always try to do every day, is stay relevant and add value. The only way to do that is read and ask questions.
Yeah, I feel like just like Mark and Benita said, I mean, I learned so much from our clients, and I think that, and those interactions, in addition to just trying to dabble in a lot and ask a lot of questions. And one thing that I think that you learn in some ways too late in your career is, as Bentina said, it's the power of saying, I don't know, and being the person in the room that is willing to say, I don't know, when a tough question comes up. And that can gain you so much credibility and really put you in an authentic place. That's the first thing. The second thing is also being able to be that person that wants to ask that tough, uncomfortable question. A lot of people know that it's hanging out there, and they don't ask it, and then it's either left unanswered, or you lack credibility because you didn't ask the one thing that needed to be asked. And you gain so much by, one, whatever you hear in response to that, and two, just the confidence in being able to ask that question. That's something that I feel like I wish I knew that earlier in my career, both of those things.
Yeah, I think it's a combo of what you and Bentina both said, because she was saying, don't let fear get in the way, and you're saying to take a risk. So just put the two of those together and you'll be on your way. Thank you.
Hey, Anna, if I could come back just really quickly to one thing that Mark said earlier. When he was talking about sort of reflecting on his career, one thing that I observed was, especially for all of us that are humanities graduates, I mean, and having gone somewhere like NC State, it's a different path for us as graduates than it is for somebody who's coming from engineering, or certainly from textiles, where there's a direct path into what you're going to do next in your career. And that whole foundation of just being able to be a good writer and to communicate and willing to have a plan for your career, I think is almost more important for anyone that's graduating in the humanities. You know, there's all this talk now of the value of a humanities or social sciences degree now, you know, versus a STEM degree. And I think the interesting thing is just hearing even from Mark, just that reflection of, if I had it to do over again, this is what I would add to the mix. And it wasn't something technical, it was English, right? And so there's value there. And I think that one thing that humanities grads have to do is just work harder at starting that path for themselves than people that may graduate in other fields do.
I love that you mentioned that, because obviously you're all humanities graduates, so I think it's really good to touch on that. And it actually led right into another question that I wanted to ask. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into that one because I thought it was really good. It came through the registration. How did you narrow on specific industries in which to develop your career? And, you know, if you've switched industries, or I know a lot of you have kind of moved around, so how did you prepare for the transitions? So I know that's a lot to kind of handle, but you want to kind of touch on, I mean, that just led right into what you were saying. So I thought that was a good question to ask the group.
You know, I always think there's some idea that you pick more of what happens in your career than you do. And so I didn't pick the utility sector. I think it's weird. It's like it picked me, right? My life just kept leading me deeper and deeper into it. But what I did do is I picked something that I found interesting and that I enjoyed, and then I prepared myself for success along the way. And so I'd always ask myself, when they'd come and ask me about a new job, or when I was thinking about a new opportunity, I'd always say, well, what does that do for me in my career? How does that lead me to where I need to go next and what I'm going to do next? And so because our career paths are more like this than they're ever like this, it to me is always some degree of, how do I best prepare myself for the opportunities that will avail me, right? And if there is an industry that you're particularly drawn to or want to really work in and on, then I think that's about, well, how do you prepare yourself to then be someone who can work in that industry? What do you know about it? Who do you know that works in it? What have you tried to do to build a great foundation for that? But just as a kind of, from my perspective, I'm always just trying to be the best version of me that's prepared to take advantage of opportunities that I can't see, because I can't see around the corners, right? It sometimes is what appears before you rather than what you run for.
That's why the top of your pyramid was the question mark, right?
The question mark, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else want to touch on that? We have.
I should cover that pretty well.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, we did have a question come through from Michelle, so thank you. She said, I completed my degree 2 years ago. I'm 45 and a mother of tween. So what advice would you give a person like me who has a career and now a degree to finding work? So the last 5 years, she's worked as a project manager and only been able to find contract work. So just advice on finding, you know, your next position or next career.
That's a tough one, particularly in today's environment. I mean, it really is. I think you just have to, keep at it. You know, there are lots of job searches now you can do on the internet that, you know, when there wasn't the internet, there was just a newspaper, it was quite a bit different. But I would try renewing old contacts and decide what is it that you want to do, right? Can I afford to take a risk, and what is it that you would really like to do, and then work toward that. It's not easy, I think, particularly for working moms right now, when the kids are at home because of COVID, they're not in school. It's really tough.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, the only specific advice that I could give would be just think about that project management skill. I mean, that's such an important and valuable skill that I know kind of moves across various industries and various roles. I'm sure that, you know, I know we have project managers on our teams in our company I'm sure Bentina and Mark have them in some role or fashion throughout their organizations. That's such an important skill, like being able to frame specifically what skill set you bring, how you're able to attack different types of projects and move those forward, and what outcomes they've had, I think is another really important piece, being able to sort of tell that story a little bit and think about it in a way that's going to help broaden sort of the industries that you can do. I mean, because it is such a tough economic environment right now, being able to think about how you broaden that network that you're applying into would be the only advice that I might have.
Yeah,
Those
the
organizational
only thing
skills are invaluable. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is if you haven't gotten your PMP certification, to get that. It just gives you one more, it's a difficult certification to get, but it gives you one more leg up over other folks. And so makes you more attractive and marketable.
Yeah, and that goes back to investing in yourself, right? Like Mark said. So yeah, that's a great advice. So, and I guess kind of to that point, another question that I wanted to ask is, how did you plan? I know the idea of mentorship has come up some too. And I think that if anybody's looking for their next opportunity, I do think that maybe a mentor, someone building their network is going to be really important. So how did you, seek a mentor that maybe helped with your career advancement at some point? Can you just kind of talk about that? That might be helpful as well.
For me personally, I don't know that I ever sought out a mentor specifically. I feel like that's something that is a little bit more explicit now in people's careers than it was for me earlier. And I really just encourage, the folks that are on my team and our staff, if they want a mentor experience, they need to raise their hand and ask for it and identify, those kind of roles that they want. I also, for us, we're a small company, a little less than 50 people. I really encourage our folks to seek mentors outside of our company, and for us to connect them with. So, for example, a lot of the mentors that people on our team work with are actually clients, and that's a great opportunity there for them to network and build and widen their professional network too. But it starts with asking for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say I've had mentors along my career, and I think we think of it almost like it's a job title, right? So that it's a consistent thing, but mentors I find go in and out and can be mentors on a particular topic or for a particular job or in a particular situation. I think that it's just being flexible about, we talked a lot about the value of relationships, being flexible about those relationships that you form with folks, and being someone who doesn't mind asking people, well, how did you get where you are, asking them for advice. But I found that my best mentors are ones that kind of grew organically. I've been assigned mentors by the company before, and it never worked as well as the folks who just took an interest in me or who I had a connection with.
Great advice. And I think sometimes people think they have to establish a mentor that's going to be their mentor for life. But I think that's a great point, that it can be at different stages or for different pieces of advice. So I think that's a really well said point. So thank you. Mark, what about you?
I think they found me sometimes. I believe it really, sort of like Jason, you develop it by the people you work with or you work for. I mean, I've at different stages of my life, the people that I've worked for, whether it was a judge or another lawyer, have really, I've been fortunate enough to work with some really good people and really good lawyers. And so there are people that I wanted to go to get advice, and I would get good, unvarnished advice, whether I wanted to hear it or not, right? And so the thing I would add is you got to be open to constructive criticism, right? You got to be self-aware, and you got to be willing to take that constructive criticism. But you develop those relationships over time, and you're right, it's at different parts of your career. I mean, the people that I seek advice from now aren't necessarily the people that I sought advice from 25 years ago.
Yep. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, we do want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we are upon the hour. So thank you so much to each of you for being wonderful speakers and giving great advice and insight. I know I learned a lot and I thought it was wonderful information. So thank you so much for taking the time to share. And thank you all who are watching today and then who will be watching the recording. So if you enjoyed today, which we hope you did, please join us next week for the final event of our Leaders of the Pack speaker series next Wednesday, October 28th, where we'll hear from the graduates from the Poole College of Management. So thank you all again for joining and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.